Hello everyone, I'm Brad and welcome to the first video under the new name of this channel, Watch, Rate, Heart. And every Friday, we'll have an episode called The Watch List. This is where I discuss the movies I watched, rate them, and decide whether it gets that coveted Letterboxd heart. Plus, I'll look at reviews on Letterboxd to see what someone in the community feels about the film. This week's episode is all about stifling heat. The films I'm discussing today all have to deal with heat in some sort of way. So let's finish this intro and let's get right into what I watched this week. Let's go!
You don't listen much, do you, boy?
I ain't heard that much worth listening to. There's a lot of guys laying down a lot of rules and regulations.
Alright, let's start with Cool Hand Luke, starring Paul Newman and George Kennedy, directed by Stuart Rosenberg. Right now, this has an average of 4.2 out of 5 on Letterboxd, a perfect 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, and it was nominated for 4 Academy Awards, including Best Actor and Best Adapted Screenplay, and won 1 Oscar for Best Supporting Actor for George Kennedy. The first thing that I found kind of strange when I was watching this film is that it reminded me a lot of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, in a number of ways. Basically, the film is about Luke, who's played by Paul Newman, who gets arrested in the beginning of the film and is sentenced to 2 years to work in a prison camp. Basically, this is a male bonding film, and much like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, it's basically about these group of guys who start to get enamored with and start to really like Luke, who is the main character of the film. That is especially true for the character played by George Kennedy. The performances are good. Newman is good, and I think Kennedy is very good in this film as well. I kind of understand why he won the Oscar in this film. One of the strongest aspects of the film is the male bonding, and it's really the strongest part of this film because you get to know Luke and you get to know the other characters and you kind of start to like them, especially George Kennedy's character in this film. At first he's kind of a dick, but then you kind of grow to like him as the movie goes forward. But the third act is when Luke's rebellion starts to happen, and honestly that part didn't nearly hit as hard for me. I definitely like the male bonding aspect, but when Luke starts to fly off the handle after a certain thing happens, it didn't fall off, but it just didn't hit as hard as the male bonding parts. The focus on the film is more about the dirt and the sweat, and especially when they're working. The film really focuses on the guys when they are hard at work with their shirts off, sweating, glistening in the sun. I understand why some people love this movie, but I like it, but I'm not completely in love with it. I like aspects of the film. I really like George Kennedy. I like the first 2 acts of the film when it's centered around the male bonding of Luke and everybody. But as the film moves forward and Luke starts to have his rebellious phase, I think it kind of doesn't nearly hit as hard, especially in the end where it's supposed to be a more of a tragic ending, and it just didn't get me in that way. So overall, I'm giving Cool Hand Luke 3.5 out of 5 stars. It's a good movie. I definitely enjoyed it. I didn't enjoy it as much as others have, especially those who think this is one of the best films of all time, one of the stone cold classics out there, but I definitely liked it. I thought it was good. So this is not just about what I think, but this is what the people on Letterboxd as well think. So let's start with this first review from Kat, who gives it 3.5 stars, and what they say is that compilation of all the times Paul Newman smiled, I want to kiss whoever made that editing choice. Alright, so I have Madison's review here. Madison gave it 3.5 stars, and he says, Paul Newman was like, I love starring in homoerotic movies so much it's unreal. I don't think this is homoerotic, but then again, I'm straight, so maybe I don't see it. But okay, sure, let's move on. Let's go with Todd here. Todd gives us also a 3.5 stars, and he hearts this, and he says, men, sweaty men, they say you can't keep sweaty men down, and this film proves it. Although no one says that, but that's kind of what I got from it. It's a good film about men interacting with men, and the macho bullshit that comes from it, but also the camaraderie that can be formed. I love the way it's shot, and Paul Newman is at his best in this film. I'm not sure this needs to be over 2 hours, but I did enjoy it quite a bit. A must-see. I agree with him on this one. I think this is more about, like I said, the camaraderie, the male bonding aspect. More of this is about homoeroticism. But again, these guys look good with their shirts off, I guess. I guess that's what does it. Let's go into our next one right here. Let's go with Chevelle here. Chevelle gives it 3 stars. Chevelle notes that the guards and the boss are more like one-note sadists, which I have to agree with. As for the prisoners, George Kennedy's dragline chooses scenery so much, I can barely remember the others, although a young Harry Dean Stanton makes an impression with me. He does chew the scenery, and I guess it's kind of an acquired taste, but I liked him in this movie, so I guess we can just agree to disagree to a certain extent. But basically, Chevelle says right here, I would not want anybody other than Paul Newman to be starring in this movie. Rebellious, determined, self-aware, taciturn. He's superb with these qualities. Maybe too good. He has so much of these self-absorbed qualities that I wish he'd verbally say more. I mean, say something philosophical. And finally, Chevelle says, I don't know, but I observed that Newman made 2 films in 1967, and I seem to belong in the lonely camp of believing that Hombre is the far more fascinating, superior of the two. Cool Hand Luke is the one that became a famous classic, obviously. Newman is terrific as usual in both, but you know which one I prefer. I haven't seen Hombre, so I can't really say whether I would agree or disagree, but I'm kind of with Chevelle on this one, honestly. And finally, a 4-star with a heart from Tenton Quarantino, and he says, any man who doesn't like this movie gets a night in the box. So now that we've gotten past Cool Hand Luke, let's change venues from the hot, sweaty country to the hot, sweaty New York streets in the 70s.
This film is about a different time, a different place. The good old days. The hot, blistering summer of 1977. There are 8 million stories in the Naked City, and this was one of them.
The film I'm discussing is Summer of Sam, starring John Leguizamo and Adrian Brody. It is co-written and directed by Spike Lee, and this has a Letterboxd score of 3.5 out of 5 and a Rotten Tomatoes score of 50% rotten. That was straight down the middle. Positive. I like the feel and look of this movie. It is intoxicating. You can feel the grungy, sleazy vibes throughout this film, and the sound design is pretty good, especially when the shootings are on screen and how sudden and bloody and loud they are. They are shocking when they come up. But also, the soundtrack as well is very good in this movie. However, the characters and the story that is encased by the Son of Sam killings are not that interesting. I didn't like any character in this film at all. There's Vinny, who's played by John Leguizamo, who I found more annoying than anything else. And it seems like everybody in this film is kind of a stereotype, which I didn't vibe with at all in this film. Like, at all. And couple that with a film that is way too long. This is 2 hours and 30 minutes, by the way. And the film really starts to drag. And here's another thing. Some of the scenes that are meant to be scary or unsettling, aka the Berkowitz scenes, are unintentionally hilarious, even though I think the talking dog is meant to be funny. Honestly, I just recommend this film for the feel and the really good direction, but man, does this film drag. I'm going to give Summer of Sam 2.5 stars out of 5. It's okay. I liked parts of it. I think, honestly, if the film wasn't as beautiful as it was, if the style wasn't so evocative in this film, I probably would give it a lower rating. But I think Spike Lee's direction makes it good enough to where it's interesting to at least watch. But I could care less about any of these characters. So 2.5 stars out of 5 for me for Summer of Sam. All right, so let's go into the Letterboxd reviews. This is Matt Lynch, who gives it 4 stars and a heart. And Matt says, another of Spike's rippers on trauma and tribalism and glimmering hope. Only this one has a talking dog. Cinema Void here has a 3-star review. And the Cinema Void says, Spike Lee does Martin Scorsese for people who love ABBA needle drops and own the Sopranos complete series box set on DVD. Yeah, this is probably one of the more accurate reviews for me, at least. It just seems like everybody is a stereotype of something in this film, and they're just not that interesting or compelling at all. So that's just me. Okay, so we have a longer review here from Raphael Jovine, who calls himself Mr. Movie, and Raphael gives us a 3 stars with a heart, and he begins with, well, I have to say I'm a little disappointed. I heard a lot about this film, and the very idea of a Son of Sam film directed by Spike Lee sounds all around enticing. And on paper, the concept and approach is more than interesting. And to be honest, Lee's direction is superb. Unfortunately, the script co-written by Lee and Christopher, which is Michael Imperioli, isn't that engaging. The excessive runtime and the poor and uninteresting characterization make for an often dull experience. And what is up with all the unnecessary borderline pornography cutaways? All in all, the film is definitely worth watching for the technical work and approach alone, but I can see how some may lose patience and quit midway through. This is definitely a film that you have to be in the right mood for. don't know if you have to be in the right mood for it, but you just have to understand it's probably not one of Spike Lee's best. But if you like Spike Lee, which I do, even though I'm kind of wishy-washy on some of his films, I think he has some bangers, and I think he has some that could be better. But this is one of those where I feel like it could be better, but it's good at least. Alright, so let's go with Matthias Larson, who gives this 2 stars, the negative review here. And basically he says this movie could have been so good, but this is a cringe fest from start to finish. No one feels real, everyone's a stereotype, and so over the top. Extremely over-dramatized, way too long, the acting is so bad at times, so excessive, lacks focus, and is just unlikable. So, yeah, I can understand that. I don't know if it's cringy. I just don't think it's all that effective. And I have to echo some of his problems here. Yeah, everyone's a stereotype in this film, and it is pretty over the top. It's overly dramatized and way too long. I'm actually agreeing with a lot of what he's saying here, but I'm giving it a higher score. But it's okay. Like I said in my review, I think that the way the film looks and the feel that it has gives it enough for me to give it a tacit recommendation. But Matthias here disagrees, and I respect that, absolutely. And finally, Andy here gives it 3 stars, and he says, an interesting movie. It feels like a fever dream, to be honest. Punk rock Adrian Brody was crazy. I've always seen the images of him in costume. Now it makes sense, really. It's a really layered performance from him as well. I really like John Leguizamo's performance a lot, too. So much going on with him. This really wasn't what I was expecting at all. I thought it was going to be more crime thriller vibes, maybe something like Zodiac. It's really long, though, almost 2.5 hours, and I think that's a huge detriment to it. I'm sure there are plenty of people who turn this off halfway through. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised either if people got halfway through this and said, nah, I'm done. So he's not the only one who thinks this. The last review said the same thing. But yeah, I kind of agree as well. Now, let's stay in NYC and turn back the clock a couple of decades with the classic sex comedy farce.
What happened at the office? Well, I shot Mr. Brady in the head, made violent love to Miss Morris, and set fire to 300,000 copies of Little Women. That's what happened at the office.
The 7-Year Itch, starring Tom Ewell and Marilyn Monroe, co-written and directed by Billy Wilder. This has a score of 3.3 out of 5 on Letterboxd and a Rotten Tomatoes score of 84%. And, okay, so positives. I like the brightly colored look of the film. I definitely like the feel of it. It's got a very light and vibrant vibe to it, so I definitely like that. And Monroe is a great highlight of the film, both funny and charming. And some of the side characters are pretty funny. That said, I can't stand Tom Ewell and his character Richard Sherman in this film. There are points in the film where I'm like, okay, he's tolerable, but I think in the beginning, first act of the film, I just thought he was insufferable. I could not stand him. And a good amount of the film didn't land for me, and it's mainly to do with not liking Richard in this film. Basically, the film is him trying not to cheat on his wife, and this is a farce, so it's meant not to be taken too seriously, but he is so whiny and insufferable that I just couldn't get behind him. So a lot of this has to do with the fact that I don't like Richard at all, and a lot of the comedy centered around him and what his comedy wasn't that funny. But I liked Marilyn Monroe, and I actually liked some of the side characters in this film. I especially liked the therapist in the few minutes he was in this film. I thought he was funny. But overall, I didn't enjoy this film. I'd give it 1.5 stars out of 5. It was just not for me. So I give you my opinion. Let's see what the Letterboxd community thinks. This is Booker, who gives it a 3-star rating. Booker says, the quirkiest that cheating on your wife has ever been. So we have M here. M didn't give it a rating, but what M says is, this movie was so terrible that it became funny and likable, or maybe it's just Marilyn. Okay, I can dig that, absolutely. Something tells me M probably would have given it a 0 if it was possible to do that on Letterboxd. So we'll go from there. Thomas Lowe gives it 2.5 stars out of 5, and Thomas says, even the goats have some duds. Monroe is great, but I was quite bored otherwise. Yeah, I have to agree. I was kind of bored too throughout this as well. We have Khalil D, who gives it 3 stars, and Khalil D says, and I thought I could be too delusional at times. Tom Ewell's character is on another level of pathetic. Yes, he is. I get what this is going for with its satire, but I don't believe it has aged very well, which is disappointing because I'm a big Wilder guy, but this one didn't do it for me. The highlight, though, is definitely Marilyn. I always enjoy her performances. She has a certain energy and charisma to her roles that only she could pull off. Such a talented, beautiful woman she was. I agree with Khalil D here on all aspects here, but especially with Marilyn. I don't think anyone could have done this role and could make it believable. She was so charming in this. I actually really liked her in this. And finally, we have The Glass Beast, who gives it 3.5 stars out of 5. Among other things, this film has color footage of Old Penn Station and the 3rd Avenue L, so it deserves to be forever archived on those grounds alone. Yeah, I didn't know that, so that's interesting. As for the story itself, the most redeeming trait of the protagonist is that he doesn't go postal, yet the world around him, not just Marilyn Monroe, but also the boss, psychiatrist, and janitor, is rich with life and personality, so for all its flaws, the movie still manages to tickle where it counts. Yeah, I think the world around the main character is more interesting than the main character, but the main character is most of the movie, unfortunately. So, there's that, but to each their own. So before I talk about the last movie that I have on my watch list this week, let's talk about some other films that I'd recommend that also have stifling, sweaty heat. Let's start with some of the classics. Let's do Jaws, which I gave 3 stars out of 5 last year. That's directed by Steven Spielberg. Definitely want to do that. A Streetcar Named Desire is directed by Elie Kazan. I gave that 4 stars out of 5. And A Heart, great movie if you have not seen it. Let's go with something around the 90s era. Let's go with A Time to Kill, directed by Joel Schumacher. Very sweaty film. And that is a 3 stars out of 5 as well. 12 Angry Men, directed by Sidney Lumet. That is 4.5 stars out of 5 with a heart for me. Definitely one of the better films that is centered around a heat wave. I gave this film 2.5 stars out of 5. It's Beau Travail, directed by Claire Denis. The only reason why I am putting this up here, even though I'm kind of meh on it, is because a lot of people do love this film, and it's also on the BFI Sight and Sound list. And I think it's at number 9-ish. I would say give it a shot. See it for yourself if you like it, but if there's something that is in the stifling heat that I think is much celebrated, it's Beau Travail. And of course, if I have to give one film that is set in stifling heat that I think is one of the better films out there, probably one of the best films out there, it's Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing, which I gave 5 stars out of 5. One of 30 films I've given 5 stars out there with a heart on there. So if you didn't like the films I just discussed right now with the stifling heat and you want to try these 6 films out, I would definitely recommend Do the Right Thing and 12 Angry Men and A Streetcar Named Desire. But if you want, give Beau Travail a shot. And finally, before we go, I'm going to review another film from 1995.
Hey. You want me to shoot this son bitch easy?
Miles!
Huh? You want me shooting?
Oh. And for this week, it's the Carl Franklin written and directed detective story, Devil in a Blue Dress, starring Denzel Washington. On Letterboxd, it has a score of 3.7 out of 5, and Rotten Tomatoes has it at a really good score of 92% fresh. The performance by Washington is solid enough. I think he does a good job in this film. The story is engaging, but it really lays on the noir trappings pretty thick. There's the voiceover narration, femme fatale, etc. It's pretty much a standard noir in that sense. The movie gets better when Don Cheadle's character arrives in this film. This film feels like a much different movie once Don Cheadle arrives, and I think it's for the better, and I kind of wish he was in it more. So my one complaint I have with the film is, though the racism angle is good, it feels like it should be more of a focus than the need to emulate noirs in this film. I really think that they should have gotten more on that angle than they did in this film. They do stay in that throughout the film, but I would have liked more of a focus on that than to keep the noir trappings as rigid as it is. I'm going to give Devil with a Blue Dress 3 stars out of 5. It's a good movie. It's definitely something that if you haven't checked it out, I would say definitely check out if you like detective stories, if you like noirs. I just don't think it's as great as maybe the critics thought it was, and some of Letterboxd felt as well. But definitely check it out if you are interested. Alright, so let's go into the Letterboxd community, see what they think. The Shrillest gives us a 4-star review, and he has some notes on here, and he says Denzel Washington spends a lot of time in a sleeveless undershirt, and I have to believe this was an intentional decision made for the good of us all. Okay. Mouse is way funnier than I remember him being. Cheadle is fantastic. Yes, I agree. And the other points that he has here are about Carl Franklin and the fact that he hasn't directed more in the past 16 years. And something that comes up a lot in these reviews is a lot of people think that this is better than LA Confidential. I'd have to strongly disagree, but again, to each their own. So let's go with this review here from Sin, who gives it 3.5 stars. He says, Devil in a Blue Dress is a whodunit noir that's engaging, smoothly shifts between humor and tension, and is bathed in the real-life texture of black life in the late 40s Los Angeles. He has some random thoughts here. He said he simply loved seeing a mainly black-centered narrative be so goddamn amusing, while also being sobering insofar as reflecting the ugly and infuriating state of anti-blackness during that specific period of time. I wish they would have focused a little bit more on that, to be absolutely honest. So that's just me, but I agree with him. So we'll go with Jen Viv here, who gives it 3 stars, and Jen Viv said, "It has style and Denzel Washington delivers a solid performance, but the movie doesn't really stick with me. Don Cheadle's character, however, brings more excitement to the story. The mystery isn't as engaging or complex as I had hoped, and the twists fall flat. It's a decent movie, but not a great one." I kind of have to agree with Jen Vivet here. I think that, again, Denzel gives a solid performance. I really like Cheadle's character. And if it wasn't for the fact that those 2 performances are engaging in this film, I think this would have been kind of a dud, because the story itself is, at best. Let's get to this review. Evan gives it 4.5 stars out of 5. He really liked this film. And Evan says, "As others have said before, when looking at 90s noir, there's really no reason to pine over LA Confidential when something this powerful exists." Okay, sure. I mean, I disagree strongly, but okay. Denzel is in his prime, the Cheadle as a loose cannon psychopath, Tom Sizemore as Tom Sizemore, Tak Fujimoto's Scorsese-esque breakneck speed camera movements, and a flawlessly constructed vision of 1940s Los Angeles. It does stray down Chinatown Lane a little too often, ultimately betraying the staples of the genre, a glaringly uncynical ending, but it's refreshing to see a black-focused studio film, which isn't encumbered with the trappings of torture porn. I kind of have to agree with him on that one, actually. That's a good point. And finally, our final Letterboxd review is Darag Walsh here, who gives it 3 stars and a heart, and Darag says, "I wouldn't say I have a favorite actor, but Denzel would be close to the top of that list. Denzel's quietly powerful performance, as well as Don Cheadle in a brilliant scene-stealing role, really elevated this past what was otherwise a fairly standard noir for me. The racial politics at play add another layer of depth to the story, and Tom Sizemore gives one of his many consistently excellent supporting performances." Yeah, I like Tom Sizemore in this too. And guys, that is it for the inaugural episode of Watch, Rate, Heart. Tell me guys, what is a movie that is set in the sweltering heat that you have hearted on your Letterboxd? What is your favorite movie set in stifling heat? Let me know in the comments, and I may use it in another episode. And speaking of the next episode, let me ask you something. Are there movies that you just feel compelled to watch, even though you aren't exactly excited to watch them? Maybe you feel obligated to. Well, this is what I'll be reviewing next week, as well as some movies from 1995 in next week's episode. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share with your friends on social media, and I will see you guys next time. This is Brad from Watch, Rate, Heart, and remember, we all watch and rate movies, but you give them the heart that lets them live forever.